Welcome back to Tell Me More Stories Told Us podcast. Ready to dive into a mystery?
Always.
Okay, great. Today, it's one that's as chilling as the Siberian winds. It's the Dyatlov Pass incident.
Oh, yeah.
You familiar with this one?
Vaguely, vaguely.
Okay, well, picture this. 1959, Soviet Union, we've got a group of experienced hikers, and they vanish in the Ural Mountains.
Oh, no.
Yeah, only to be found dead later under really bizarre circumstances.
I can see why that's been captivating people for decades. What makes it so intriguing?
It's this perfect storm of adventure and tragedy and unanswered questions.
And you said experienced hikers, right?
Yeah, not amateurs. So let's start by getting to know this Dyatlov group, these adventurers who set out to conquer these snowy peaks.
Absolutely. So there are 10 of them, all skilled hikers. They had grade 2 certification, and they were striving for that highest grade, the third.
Wow, so really experienced.
Yeah, and their goal was to reach this peak, Otorten Mountain. It's notorious for its challenging terrain and harsh weather conditions.
And we're talking February in the Urals.
Yeah, so that's adding another level of difficulty.
To make things even more intense, one member, Yuri Udin, had turned back early because of health issues.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine knowing that your friends are out there
Oh, yeah.
facing those elements without you?
Chilling.
Yeah. So we have 9 hikers continuing this expedition, pushing forward into this unforgiving landscape. Thankfully, they documented their journey through diaries and cameras.
Oh, good.
Yeah, they were recovered later. It helped piece together a timeline of their movements.
So like a breadcrumb trail through the snow leading us closer to the mystery.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those breadcrumbs tell us that the group had to deviate from their original plan because of a blizzard.
Uh-oh.
So instead of their intended campsite, they set up camp on the slope of Kholat-Syakhl Mountain. Okay, so we've got a change in plans, we've got a brewing blizzard, and a remote mountain slope. I can already sense the tension building here. What happened next?
Well, this is where the mystery really begins. Dyatlov was supposed to send a telegram when they returned, but weeks passed in silence. So their families, understandably, started to get really worried, and they initiated a search and rescue operation.
And what did they find when they reached that group's final campsite?
A scene that was both eerie and perplexing. The tent was damaged, cut open from the inside as if somebody was desperately trying to escape.
Oh, wow.
And footprints led away from the tent, some barefoot, some wearing only socks. It was a scene that immediately raised more questions than answers.
I'm getting chills just imagining that discovery. A damaged tent, footprints leading into the snowy wilderness. It sounds like something out of a horror movie.
It does, doesn't it? And that initial discovery was just the beginning. Over 2 months, they found the bodies of all 9 hikers scattered across the mountainside.
Were there any signs of what caused their deaths?
So this is where things get even more complex. 6 of the hikers died from hypothermia, which, given the conditions, is tragic but not entirely surprising.
Right.
However, the remaining 3 had suffered severe injuries. 1 with a fractured skull, 2 with major chest trauma.
Hold on a second. Those injuries sound much more violent than just exposure to the element.
Exactly. The severity of those injuries was baffling. They were described as being comparable to a car crash. Yet there were no external wounds to explain those fractures. It was if they had been subjected to immense pressure from an unknown source.
Okay, so we've got hypothermia, unexplainable injuries, a scene that suggests a hasty and chaotic departure from the tent. It's like a puzzle with missing pieces.
And those missing pieces have fueled countless theories over the years. The initial investigation, though, concluded that the hikers died from, quote, a compelling natural force, end quote. However, that vague explanation did little to quell the speculation and intrigue surrounding this case.
A compelling natural force. It's a phrase that sounds almost ominous, don't you think?
Right.
Like a force beyond human comprehension. It's no wonder people have been trying to make sense of this tragedy for decades.
Absolutely. And the more we delve into those details, the more those theories seem to multiply. Some point to natural explanations, like avalanches or those powerful katabatic winds that can whip through mountainous regions. Others delve into the realm of the unexplained, from infrasound to secret military activity.
It's like choose your own adventure for mystery enthusiasts, right?
Yeah.
You could explore the scientific explanations, consider the psychological aspects of decision-making under duress, or even dive into Cold War conspiracies.
Yeah.
But before we get lost in that labyrinth of theories, let's rewind a bit and focus on the inconsistencies in that initial investigation because, sometimes the devil is in the details.
You're absolutely right. There are a number of details that just don't quite add up, and those discrepancies have only fueled further speculation and intrigue.
Intrigue is definitely the word for it. But before we unpack those intriguing details, let me take a moment to remind you to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the other fascinating stories we explore here on Tell Me More.
Now, about those inconsistencies. One researcher, Keith McCloskey, has dedicated years to meticulously examining the evidence and has uncovered some perplexing discrepancies that raise serious questions about the thoroughness of the original investigation.
Ooh, this is where it gets really interesting. Tell me more about what McCloskey found. What kind of details are we talking about?
Well, for starters, he noticed a discrepancy in the reported distances related to the location of the snow shelter where 4 of the hikers were found.
Wait, so the location of the bodies wasn't even accurately documented. That seems like a pretty crucial detail to get right.
You would think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
One report places the shelter quite a distance from the pine tree where the first 2 bodies were discovered, but another report puts them practically within shouting distance of that tree.
So which report is accurate?
Well, McCloskey believes that the closer location is more likely based on photographs from the 1959 search, and he points out that the photos show a rock in the stream, right where Dubinina's body was found.
Okay, so right off the bat, we have a potential error in the mapping of the scene. That definitely casts doubt on the reliability of the initial investigation. What other discrepancies did McCloskey uncover?
Well, he also raised questions about the avalanche theory, which was, and still is, a popular explanation. He argued that the location of the tent near the ridge didn't really make sense in terms of avalanche risk. There wasn't enough snow buildup to trigger one, and the wind direction actually would have blown snow away from that side of the ridge.
So the avalanche theory starts to crumble under closer scrutiny.
It seems that way. But it's not just the physical evidence that McCloskey found puzzling. He also uncovered some unusual behavior on the part of the investigators themselves. For example, he discovered that Lev Ivanov, the lead investigator, was supposedly ready to make another trip to the pass to take a closer look at the bodies, particularly those last 4 and their injuries. However, a higher-up, Deputy Prosecutor General Irikov, arrived from Moscow and abruptly ordered the case closed.
Wow, that sounds like a classic Cold War cover-up. Shut down the investigation before it uncovers something inconvenient.
It certainly raises that possibility. And there's another detail that's equally perplexing. McCloskey found out that Ivanov's boss, Evgeny Okashev, was present for the entire autopsy process, which lasted 3 full days.
3 days. That's a long time to spend observing an autopsy.
Mm-hmm.
There must have been something specific they were looking for, or perhaps trying to conceal.
Exactly. And according to McCloskey, Okashev himself found it strange, stating that it was the only time in his entire career that he had witnessed a high-ranking official personally observing an autopsy for that length of time.
So we have inconsistencies in the physical evidence, a case that's abruptly shut down, and unusual behavior from high-ranking officials. It's starting to feel like we're peeling back layers of a conspiracy here.
The elements of a conspiracy are certainly present, especially given the time period and the Soviet Union's penchant for secrecy. These discrepancies, along with the inherent mystery of the case itself, have kept researchers and armchair detectives engrossed for decades. There's a sense that something is being hidden, a truth that lies just beyond our grasp.
It's like a historical jigsaw puzzle, with a few crucial pieces missing. We can see the general picture, but there are gaps that prevent us from fully understanding the image.
And those gaps are where our imaginations run wild. Was it a natural phenomenon that we still don't fully understand? Was it a tragic accident compounded by a series of bad decisions? Or was there something more sinister at play, something that the authorities were desperate to cover up?
The questions keep piling up, don't they? But before we delve into the many theories that have been proposed to explain the Dyatlov Pass incident, let's take a closer look at some of the less likely explanations that have been debunked over the years. After all, to get closer to the truth, we need to eliminate the noise and focus on the signals that might actually lead us somewhere.
Yeah, it's a bit like detective work, isn't it? We got to sift through the evidence, eliminate those red herrings, and see what's left standing.
Exactly. So, which theories have been pretty much ruled out? What can we safely eliminate from our list of suspects?
Well, one of the more sensational theories involved an attack by the indigenous Mansi people who lived in the region. However, there's just no evidence to support this. The Mansi were known to be peaceful, and there were no signs of a struggle or any involvement from anyone outside the hiking group.
Okay, so we can cross off the Mansi attack theory. What about animal attacks? Couldn't a bear or a pack of wolves have inflicted those injuries?
It's a reasonable question, but again, the evidence doesn't support it. There were no animal tracks found at the scene, and a group of experienced hikers, especially in winter conditions, wouldn't have simply abandoned their tent for no reason.
Right, they were prepared for the elements and knew how to handle wildlife encounters. So no mysterious beasts lurking in the shadows. What about the idea that they got into some kind of argument or fight amongst themselves? Could tensions have boiled over, leading to a confrontation?
That's another theory that's been thoroughly debunked. Everything we know about the group suggests they were harmonious. Plus, as we discussed earlier, the severity of those injuries, especially the internal trauma, it just doesn't align with the typical fight between humans.
So we can rule out the Mansi attack, animal attack, and the internal squabble theories. It seems like we're narrowing down the possibilities, moving away from external threats, and focusing more on the group's actions and the environment they were in.
Precisely. And that brings us to the heart of the mystery. Why did they leave the tent in the first place? Was it a sudden, panicked flight? Or was there a more calculated but ultimately flawed decision-making process at play?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And to answer it, we have to delve into the realm of theories that attempt to explain what might have triggered that fateful departure from the safety of their tent.
Right. Let's start with one of the most prominent theories, the avalanche. It's a plausible explanation on the surface, right? We're talking about a mountainous region, winter conditions, a group caught in a blizzard. An avalanche could certainly explain the damaged tent and that sense of urgency to escape.
Right. It's a scenario that plays out in countless survival movies. But didn't McCloskey cast some doubt on that theory?
He did. As we mentioned earlier, the location of the tent, according to his research, wasn't in a typical avalanche zone. The slope wasn't steep enough, and experienced hikers like Dyatlov and Zolotaryov, who is practically an expert in mountain safety, wouldn't have chosen such a vulnerable spot for their camp.
So the avalanche theory, while initially compelling, starts to lose its footing when we examine the specifics of the location and the group's expertise. What are some of the other natural phenomena that have been proposed as possible explanations?
Another theory involves those powerful katabatic winds we mentioned before. These are winds that can rush down mountainsides with incredible force, creating a sudden and potentially very dangerous situation.
So imagine you're inside the tent, blizzard raging outside, and suddenly this wall of wind slams into you. It would definitely create a sense of panic and the urge to escape.
Exactly. And there is some evidence that supports this theory. A 2019 Swedish-Russian expedition to the site proposed that a particularly violent katabatic wind might have been the culprit. They even drew parallels to a similar incident in Sweden in 1978, where a katabatic wind caused multiple fatalities among a group of hikers.
So there's a precedent for this kind of wind-induced tragedy. That definitely adds weight to the theory. But wouldn't the investigators have noticed signs of such a powerful wind event?
You'd think so, but katabatic winds can be very localized and unpredictable. Plus, the evidence might have been obscured by the blizzard that was already in progress.
Okay, so we have the avalanche theory, which is shaky but still possible, and the katabatic wind theory, which seems to have more supporting evidence. Are there any other natural explanations that have been considered?
There is one more that delves into the realm of the less tangible infrasound.
Infrasound. Remind me what that is again?
It's essentially a very low-frequency sound below the range of human hearing. But even though we can't hear it, infrasound can have a very real effect on the human body. It can cause feelings of unease, anxiety, and even physical discomfort.
So you're saying that this silent sound wave could have caused the hikers to feel so uneasy that they felt compelled to leave the tent?
That's the theory. The idea is that the wind, interacting with the mountain's unique topography, could have created something called a Kármán vortex street.
Okay, I'm going to need a little more explanation on that one. What's a Kármán vortex street?
Imagine a stream flowing around a rock. You'll see swirling eddies forming downstream. A Kármán vortex street is a similar phenomenon, but with air instead of water. As the wind flows around an object, in this case the mountain, it creates these swirling patterns of air currents that can generate infrasound.
So this invisible sound waves emanating from the mountain itself could have been bombarding the hikers, making them feel anxious and disoriented. It's a pretty spooky concept.
It is. And proponents of this theory suggest that the hikers, feeling this unexplained discomfort, might have attributed it to something dangerous, perhaps a perceived threat to their safety, and decided to flee the tent.
So they weren't necessarily running from something they could see or hear, but rather from a feeling, a sense of dread induced by this infrasound. It's like a scene out of a psychological thriller.
Exactly. And it adds a layer of complexity to the mystery, blurring the lines between rational decision-making and the primal instincts that kick in when we feel threatened.
Okay, so we've explored avalanches, katabatic winds, and now this eerie concept of infrasound. It seems like we're moving along a spectrum of possibilities, from the concrete to the more intangible. Where do we go from here? What other theories have been proposed?
Well, this is where we enter the realm of theories that lean more towards human intervention, some bordering on conspiracy.
Ooh, conspiracy theories. This is where things usually get really interesting. What kind of human involvement are we talking about?
Some theories involve secret military activity. Remember, this was the height of the Cold War, a time of heightened secrecy and paranoia.
Right, the Soviet Union was notoriously tight-lipped about their military operations. So what kind of military activity could have been happening in that remote region?
One theory suggests that the hikers might have stumbled upon a secret testing zone for parachute mines. There were reports of orange orbs being sighted in the sky around the time of the incident, which some speculate could have been military aircraft or descending parachute mines.
Parachute mines. That's a pretty chilling thought. And could those mines explain the severe internal injuries suffered by some of the hikers?
That's what some proponents of this theory believe. They argue that the hikers might have been caught in a blast, which could explain the internal trauma without external wounds.
It's a compelling idea, but is there any evidence to support it? Do they find any remnants of those mines or any other signs of military activity in the area?
That's where things get tricky. The evidence is largely circumstantial. The orange orbs could have been anything, and the lack of physical evidence could be explained by a cover-up. After all, if the Soviet military was conducting secret tests in the area, they wouldn't want to leave any traces behind.
Right, a cover-up would certainly explain the abrupt shutdown of the investigation and the unusual presence of high-ranking officials during the autopsies. It's all starting to sound like a classic Cold War spy thriller.
It does, doesn't it? And the more we delve into the possibilities, the more the lines between fact and fiction start to blur.
So we have natural explanations, psychological factors, and now the intrigue of potential military involvement. It's a tangled web of possibilities, and each thread seems to lead us further into the heart of the mystery. It's like we're detectives trying to solve this case, but we've got limited evidence and a whole lot of speculation.
A whole lot, yeah.
But that's what makes this so fascinating, right?
I think so, yeah.
The challenge of piecing together this puzzle, even when we know there might not be a complete picture at the end.
Exactly. The Dyatlov Pass incident is a case that invites us to think critically, to weigh the evidence, to consider these multiple perspectives. And it's a reminder that sometimes the most compelling mysteries are those that defy those easy answers.
So where do we go from here? I mean, we've explored a range of theories, from natural disasters to secret military operations. Is there a way to kind of narrow down the possibilities, or are we destined to wander in this labyrinth of speculation forever?
Well, while a definitive answer may remain elusive, I think it's helpful to consider the convergence of certain factors. What if it wasn't just one single event that led to the tragedy,
Okay.
but rather a chain reaction,
Okay.
a cascade of unfortunate circumstances that spiraled out of control?
Okay, I like where you're going with this.
Right.
Walk me through this chain reaction theory. What might have been that initial trigger that set everything in motion?
Let's imagine for a moment that the hikers, they experienced something unsettling inside the tent.
Okay.
Maybe it was an unusual sound, maybe a sudden gust of wind, or even that infrasound phenomenon we talked about.
Right.
And this initial event, while not inherently dangerous, creates this sense of unease, a feeling that something isn't quite right.
So they're on edge, their senses are heightened.
But then perhaps another event occurs, something that kind of pushes them over the edge. Maybe they see those strange lights in the sky that some witnesses reported.
Yeah.
Maybe a support beam in the tent breaks, creating this impression of an imminent collapse. Whatever that trigger is, it's enough to spark a panicked reaction.
They make that decision to flee the tent, seeking safety out in the blizzard. But as we know, that decision proved to be fatal.
Exactly. Once outside the tent, the harsh realities of their situation set in. The freezing temperatures, the disorienting blizzard, the difficult terrain, all these factors compound their predicament.
They're separated, some inadequately dressed. They're struggling to survive in this really unforgiving environment.
And in their desperate attempts to regroup, to find shelter, or simply to stay warm, some succumb to hypothermia. Others, perhaps trying to help their comrades or navigate that treacherous terrain, suffer those fatal injuries we discussed earlier.
It's a tragic scenario. A series of events that, when combined, create this perfect storm of misfortune.
And because we lack that clear timeline of events, we're left to speculate about the specific details, right? We're trying to reconstruct a tragedy from scattered clues, fragmented memories, and this chilling silence that hangs over the entire incident.
It's a reminder that, even in the face of our best efforts to understand and explain, some mysteries will retain their, enigmatic hold on us.
And perhaps that's okay. The Dyatlov Pass incident, in all its chilling ambiguity, forces us to confront the limits of human knowledge and the, untamed power of the natural world. It serves as a cautionary tale about the fragility of life and the importance of respecting those forces that can overwhelm us.
It's a story that stays with you long after you've heard it.
Oh.
It's a puzzle you keep trying to solve, even when you know there might not be a neat and tidy solution, and maybe that's part of its enduring appeal.
Absolutely. It invites us to engage our imaginations, to explore the possibilities, and to acknowledge that sometimes the journey of seeking answers is just as important as the answers themselves. The Dyatlov Pass incident is a case that, despite, decades of investigation and analysis, continues to captivate and intrigue us. It's a testament to the enduring power of mystery and the human desire to make sense of the unknown.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the possibilities and draw your own conclusions. What do you think happened that fateful night on Dead Mountain? Thanks for joining us on Tell Me More Stories Told Us podcast.
Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next deep dive into the strange and fascinating corners of history.
Until next time.